So
And
she
then the
walked
squirrel says, "Dog!"
Yes, it never gets
Crazy
old, does it?
kids.
So, hello, everybody.
I forgot how fun these are. I've
Yeah,
been away for a
they
little
should be,
while.
shouldn't they? It's Friday after all.
Yeah.
So, hello everybody. Welcome to the digital download. I hope that everybody has had a good week. Obviously, regular viewers might notice that Eric isn't here this week, and that's because he's giving a TED talk tomorrow in Aberdeen. And Tim isn't here this week because he's gone to Aberdeen to watch Eric give his TED talk tomorrow. And in fact, I'm going to Aberdeen straight after this in order that I can watch Eric give his TED talk. So normal service will be resumed next week.
If you can call this normal.
Well, yeah, good point. Good point. So if we go around and introduce ourselves, Rob.
Hi, I'm Rob Durant, founder of Flywheel Results and a proud DLA partner.
Alex.
Alex from Sapiro, founder of Sapiro and proud DLA partner. Thanks for having me.
Linwood.
I'm Linwood Ross, founder of Accelerate and DLA Ignite.
Let us know at the end of this episode.
Yeah, I'll tell you later.
Yeah, and lastly, I'm Adam. I'm co-founder of DLA Ignite, and last but least, I meant to say, co-founder of DLA Ignite, and delighted to be here. So this is our weekly roundup of what's gone on. Although increasingly we seem to be talking to really interesting guests, and the last couple of weeks we've had interesting guests, and we've got interesting guests to come up, and this week we're looking at data. Which is one of those really fascinating things, I think, for businesses in the modern age. Because data, we all understand the importance of data, or do we? Is my point. Because I think that everybody gets that data is about truth and about fact and about helping to make right decisions. But one of the things that when you really scratch underneath the surface, I always think that those are platitudes that people use because they don't actually understand how data can be used. And they don't understand the importance of data and how to collect data and all of those things around making better decisions and having more insights. So today we have a very important guest. So I first heard of this person at an event that I was at. I was completely blown away by the presentation that they gave. And at the time, they were head of data for Money Supermarket. And ever since then, I have been trying to meet up with them for a coffee. And for whatever reason, we just haven't been able to synchronize diaries to do so. And in 2019, this person was named in the Data IQ 100 list, named the most influential person in data in the world. And actually, they're always on the top 100 list, just that they happen to be at the very top that year. And they're in it again this year. And I don't think the positions have yet been released. But this person has, as well as taking up advisory roles at European Data Science Academy, NEOS, Avanta, part of Gartner, and Cambridge University, this person went on from Money Supermarket head of data to be chief data scientist at Aviva, and the last couple of years has been head of data at the Lego Group. So what can I say? We are not worthy. So I'd like to introduce Orlando Machado, also the person with the coolest name of any guest that we've had, and I suspect any guest we're ever likely to have. So Orlando, welcome.
Wow, what an intro. Yeah, thank you for having me. And yeah, hi everyone. I hope you've all had great weeks.
Hi, Orlando. In honor of you joining us today, I just spent a little time this week doing this. Just wanted to.
Oh,
I
very
just took
nice.
my spare time and I put this together so that.
Very nice. I'm not worthy.
Fantastic. So I think that one of the things that's really interesting about what you do in the world of data is that at the point that you got into data, there was no data industry, really, was there? You know, it's like 25 years ago. So tell us how you decided that this would be something exciting to do, and explain the journey of data as an industry, because you were there at the inception, really, and you're there now, and you must have seen enormous changes.
Yeah, I mean, totally. I think I was always interested in maths and sciences. I did a degree at Warwick University. I did a degree called Morse, which is Maths, Operational Research, Stats and Economics. Now it's a pretty popular degree. At the time when I did it, I think there were 30 of us. You know, I think now many hundreds of people do this course, but there were 30 of us then. And it really just sparked my interest in problem solving and using maths and some of these kind of numerical techniques to solve problems. I took the decision to go straight to a PhD, and the PhD was in applied statistics. It's the kind of thing that would be called machine learning today, because it was it was about kind of extending the reach of some statistical techniques using some of the advances in computing. But as you say, there wasn't a great deal of data. I think I had a data set of 2,708 records, which was kind of groundbreaking at the time. But it seemed like something quite interesting to me. There was a problem around people losing their hearing when they worked for noisy industries. But it was actually quite hard to unpick whether this was the natural process of aging or whether the noise of an industry was a contributing factor. So there was an opportunity to use some fairly advanced statistical techniques to try to unpick that. But to me, I had no idea at the time that this was going to turn into a huge industry. It was a personal attempt to do something quite interesting, kind of quite unusual, to be a bit more independent and to think about how I could use problem-solving skills in the real world. I had no idea at that stage that this would turn into a big career. And actually, at the time, people gave me slightly strange looks for taking this kind of option, which would, on the face of it, leave me overqualified for every other job. And, you know, unless I was to go into academia full time, there weren't too many other options. That's when I guess the industry took off. So I finished with a PhD in 1996. So that's when I got my PhD. It was kind of quantitative analysis in finance was getting pretty big, but I didn't feel that was really the right route for me. I wasn't kind of too interested in the field. I took a job in academia, actually, which was quite interesting. It was about trying to use statistical modeling to predict the budgets for health services, actually in an epidemiology department. So the kind of thing that became very trendy again in 2020. But I didn't really think to mention to anybody for probably the 20 years in between, because epidemiology was a field that I think not too many people had heard of until everyone became an epidemiologist in 2020. But you know, in 1998, when I was doing this for Leicestershire Health Authority, it was quite an advanced, you know, very kind of modern approach to using data, and it was relatively rare. And it was called computerized simulation. You know, people didn't really talk about machine learning then. We were talking about using computerized simulation, using actually techniques that have become very popular: Bayesian analysis, the kind of probability forecasting, but with a very serious outcome, which is about trying to get the budgets right for very specialist health services. And these are people with severe disabilities. So I kind of got a taste for this kind of application then. I've done a number of roles since, and I think this field has just exploded. You know, certainly over the last 15 years, but actually even faster over the last 5 years, with advances in computing power, the advances in the kind of mathematical techniques, but I think more importantly, the amount of data in the world. So, you know, we're all carrying around tracking devices, telling which kind of, you know, track our location or all the things that we're doing. So that's a huge amount of data. I think also the definition of data has broadened. You know, data used to be really the kind of things that you could imagine in a spreadsheet, rows and columns of labeled numbers. But now video is data, pictures are data, audio is data, all of these things, because they're digitized, They are essentially data sources. And so when you've got this wide variety of data, and you've got more computation, and you've got more advanced mathematical techniques, it just opens up the opportunity to try to turn that into insight somehow, learn about people somehow. Also, it helps you automate those kind of things. So I think that's how the field has exploded. It used to be one-off bits of analysis, totally offline, but quite insightful. It's now turned into an industry because you've got these techniques that you can automate these kind of approaches, and you've got these many more types of source data. And so think about the way that data is used for advertising. Now it can be done in real time, very, very quickly, very automated, using extremely deep information about consumer behavior. I was doing that kind of thing in the early 2000s. So it was, I worked for a marketing agency, Wonderman. We had an analytics team, and that agency had always used data to try to understand consumers better, actually for about 50 years. But I think the scale of that kind of approach has exploded with all of these kind of advances. So I think it's turned into an industry, whereas before it was a specialism, and quite a niche specialism at that.
Yeah. So I'd love to know how or what why you chose Lego, and also kind of the scope of the role. Because what you talk about there, it's, I come from a marketing background, and it's easy to think that it's all about marketing, but it's not.
Yeah. So I think there are lots of factors that are interesting about the Lego Group. I think to start with, that the brand is incredible. And so it's something that brings a smile to people's faces, but it's also something that has an important purpose. And we talk about, we inspire and develop the builders of tomorrow. And if you look at our products, they have a very big educational component. So I think we're genuinely doing something good for the world with these incredible products that engage people. I think to me personally, I've always really liked the fact that it kind of combines engineering and creativity. I think that's a really nice sweet spot. I found that when I worked in advertising or in marketing, it was kind of that sort of combination of engineering and creativity was really, personally appealing to me. I think in terms of the role, one of the things about the Lego Group is that we are investing very heavily in digital technology and in the kind of associated digital capabilities, because we know that we need to, we want to make the brick center of the experience for people that play with Lego, products. But I think we need to supplement that with really great digital experiences. We've got apps now that we launch that help people build products together. But that's equally true of things like our shopping experiences. You can buy products on lego.com. We need to make sure that's great. So we're investing heavily in digital technology. And to me, data is the flip side of digital technology. And if you scratch the surface of any digital company, you'll find a data company, because what you can do with data is that you can learn really quickly about the things that are working and things that aren't working. And you can also adapt really quickly to changes in the environment or changes to consumer expectations. So those are the kind of disciplines that we said at the Lego Group we want to try to embrace. And we want to embrace those alongside the physical brick. The physical brick is such an important part of our DNA that it's not an either or. We want to do both of those. So the opportunity was really kind of appealing to me. It's the time when the Lego Group is trying to think about the next phase of growth, and that has to come through understanding digital technology much better, which also is about data.
Yeah. So do you come at it from a customer experience perspective, or do you come at it from how do we monetize the data?
It's typically not monetizing the data in the kind of traditional sense of, how do you find a market for that data and find somebody to sell it to? That's not really what we're trying to do. What we're trying to do is work out how data will add value to the Lego Group. And it's not just, to your point about, is it just marketing? Marketing is important. We have we do a lot of analysis around measuring the effectiveness of our marketing. We have recommendation engines that sit on lego.com. But equally, we have data that comes from molding machines. And we can think about how to make our processes more efficient. We can try to think about our supply chain and logistics and all of the different parts that make up the Lego group. It's quite an interesting business because we do just about everything. We've got new product development, which is increasingly using data-driven customer insight to inform it. But then we do the manufacturing. We've got a retail business, we've got a wholesale business, we've got customer engagement, we've got everything that a marketing business does, but also everything that a consumer manufacturer does as well. So we've kind of got a lot of aspects to the data, to our business, and all of those things are increasingly using or generating data. Which kind of means really the problem is prioritizations. We have to kind of work out how we attack the problem in the way that actually generates the most value for our consumers or for the Lego group.
That's really interesting, because as I was kind of thinking about us having this discussion today, I was thinking that the connection between data and marketing is fairly well established. Most people in business understand the importance of having some data points for their marketing, simply to know what's working and what isn't, and what time they should do things, and all of those kind of ways of finessing the creative element of marketing and talking to people. But I gathered that data were strands that ran through every element of a business. And I think most people get that. But then when you say to somebody, okay, so how does this impact this bit of the business? They kind of scratch their head and go, well, I don't know. I kind of know that it does, but I'm not quite sure how that happens. So with things like logistics and manufacturing and creating new products, how do you use data to make those sorts of decisions to keep you ahead of the competitors in the marketplace?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think I think it's worth unpicking when you think about decisions, what that really means. So we're often thinking about two types of things that we can do. One of them is human learning. So how do you actually put some facts on the table that help a human make a better decision? And then the flip side of it, the kind of machine learning side of things, is how do you try to make a process that can maybe run itself, so that there's an automated element where a human might have, at the moment, things like the way that we have, we look at our molding machines, requires a lot of effort from people just trying to maintain, calibrate, ensure the successful running of molding machines. And so there might be an opportunity there where we say, this is the real expert at calibrating a molding machine. How do we make sure that that person's expertise can be applied to 1,000 molding machines? And those might be around the world. And we can do that by trying to codify what that person is doing. You turn it into data, turn it into an algorithm, and then deploy it in another area. So quite often it's about just trying to say, on the one hand, how do you try to put data in front of a person so that they can make a better decision? And on the other hand, it can be, how do you try to take intelligence out of people's heads, codify it, and allow it to be deployed in places where that person doesn't happen to be at that moment in time?
Brilliant. Because I remember reading or hearing a few years ago that data scientist was one of the most in-demand roles of the next decade. And certainly data scientists seem to be cropping up all over the place now. So why does a business need a data scientist?
Well, it's still, the thing about data scientists, I mean, it's still true that if you Google sexiest job of the 21st century, you get data scientists coming up as Google's #1 result. That's been true for about 10 years. I was with my team in Denmark on Wednesday, and we were kind of talking about this, about how data scientist has become the very trendy term. But I think increasingly data engineers have become recognized, I think, for the role they're playing. And data engineers are often about kind of ensuring the efficient transfer of data across an organization in a way that makes it usable. And that's as important as the data scientist, which is about just trying to distill the data into something that is an insight, or something that's an algorithm, which is essentially an automated summarization of the data. So, what does somebody need a data scientist for? People will need data scientists and data engineers where there is a large amount of data, and there's an opportunity to distill that into some kind of insight that you might use. So an example that, you mentioned marketing, where this kind of discipline is quite well established. Classic kind of segmentation of a consumer base is the kind of thing that's very well suited to data analysis. You could try to take behavioral data on consumers and understand the different types of people that are interacting with your brand using algorithms that unpick, that can spot the trends or spot patterns. You can take that to quite an extreme, where you get to sort of personalization situations where an algorithm will automatically try to match an individual person with an offer or a product that's right for them. And those kind of algorithms are built by data scientists, but they're built in conjunction with data engineers who are making sure that the data is fit for purpose, robust, high quality, available, and in the right kind of form for the algorithm to consume.
So let's just actually dig down into that a little bit, because that's really interesting what you said there. So you come onto my website. I'm trying to make sure that I maximize the value that I get with you, the customer, on my website. So I'm going to make some of those decisions about the things that might be offered to you. So how does a data scientist pick what things are offered? Because you've got a finite pool of products, but you've got an infinite pool of people that you're trying to categorize. So I go, okay, Orlando's on my website. He's one of those people that's got the sexiest job in the world at the moment because he's a data scientist. Therefore, I'm going to offer him some really cool clothes or whatever it is. Who actually makes the decision about this kind of person looks like this kind of customer?
There are many ways to do this. Some of them involve trying to mathematically understand the relationships between different products. And so understand, if you understand all of the attributes of a product, whether it appeals to price sensitive people, whether it appeals to people that like certain types of brands, whether it appeals to, if you think about where this has been well established and where I've kind of, spent a bit of my career in is working with Tesco on Tesco's Club Card. If you think about the products that sit in a shopping basket, they might kind of give you clues as to whether people like to cook from scratch or whether they like ready meals. Or they might give you a clue as to whether people like to have a value product or a more premium product. Or they might give you a clue as to whether people like a traditional British kind of produce, or whether people like something that's maybe kind of more Asian influenced, or other kind of aspects to their taste. Or whether people like to have fresh products, or whether they want to have frozen or tinned, or those kind of things. So an algorithm will try to pick out those kind of trends, or pick out those sorts of characteristics, and then match a person with products that also meet those characteristics. So in a typical kind of recommendation engine, like you might see on Amazon, or you might see on Netflix, we're not talking about having only 5 or 6 types of people and we try to push everything into those 5 or 6 groups. We're talking about tens, hundreds, thousands of micro segments of customers, which are generated by these algorithms. And I think that quite often you have to get the kind of balance right, because the more micro segments you generate, the harder it is to provide some kind of human oversight over what you're doing. And that may or may not be a problem. And it's typically, it's a problem if you're talking about something very sensitive. It's a problem if you're talking about something like, financial services area, where you're kind of, there are bad outcomes to recommending the wrong kind of product. you might not think it's such a problem if you're offering people film choices or something where you're kind of thinking about in the entertainment era, where if somebody makes a choice that is not their favorite film, it's maybe not such a big deal. So there's always some kind of judgment to make around how much human oversight is required, what kind of algorithm is used, and also, based on the kind of outcomes that you're trying to generate. It's
interesting that you should say that, because Netflix, in my experience, has a particularly poor algorithm. If you watch a Bruce Willis film, it recommends loads of Bruce Willis films. Actually, it's not the fact that Bruce Willis is in it is the thing that I like. It's the fact that it's this kind of film. And they've got a very poor one. By contrast, Spotify have got a particularly good algorithm, because it offers things up that are, I think that probably Lenwood is laughing at this.
Plenty of water.
Yeah. So I guess crafting that algorithm is the major win, isn't it? That's
and I think those examples show that this is not straightforward. And although this is something that's been around for a long time, there's still a lot of work to do in this area to try to make these algorithms behave in the way that a consumer will expect them to. Netflix was very early into this game. It was pretty famous in data science circles back in, I think it was about 2006, where they offered a prize of $1 billion for anybody that could beat the success of their algorithm by 10 percentage points from memory. So I think they offered a competition to everybody a long time ago, 2006. And I think it was kind of, it built their reputation as people who could take these algorithms quite seriously. And this was back when Netflix was a DVD business. And I'm going to see if I get the details of this right. Don't sue me if I get this wrong. But I think there was a kind of interesting story about how the algorithm that won and was very successful at predicting the Netflix DVD recommendations actually didn't really work when Netflix switched to streaming. Because, and if you think of it, like the way a DVD recommendation, the way a DVD rental business used to work was that you would set up your own, you would put in your list of films that you wanted to watch. And then over time in the post, you would get DVDs, and they'd be maybe a couple of months away. And in turn, you would get the DVDs that you would put on your list. Whereas with streaming, you just pick a film and you watch it now. And there was quite an interesting bit of behavioral psychology there, because, if you're picking the film on your DVD list that you're going to watch in a month's time, you pick very worthy films that you think, I think I should watch that at some point, and they're very serious, and that's right. Those are the films that people kind of picked when they were thinking about the future. But if you're sitting down and it's Friday night and you're going to pick the film that you watch now, you might watch The Hangover 3 because you think it's quite kind of easy, and you're not going to watch 10 Years a Slave because maybe it's a bit hard work. And that kind of change in people's preferences meant that the algorithm that was tuned for DVD lists that people made actually didn't really work very well when it came to streaming. So these kind of small thick changes in the way that recommendations are generated actually have big implications in terms of what's relevant to people.
Orlando, it sounds like excuse me, it sounds like most of the world is about 25 years behind you in data science. So as we're approaching this, should people focus more on how and what data is collected, or how to interpret it? Which should we teach first in school, or emphasize more, in your opinion?
I think that's a tricky question, because of course the answer is you have to do both. It doesn't work unless you do both. And the kind of the phrase of garbage in, garbage out is truer now than it ever has been, because you've got it's so easy to kind of learn how to build algorithms, and you've got all sorts of tools that can do that. And it's actually quite difficult to get the data in a good shape to feed those algorithms in a way that means you've got results that you can stand by. But I think if you think about, you're talking about people at school, university, and education, I think understanding the second one, so understanding the opportunities and what you can do with data, I think probably has to come first, because that kind of sparks the interest. I think it sparks the demand, but I think that needs to be closely followed up with the hard work that has to happen to make this robust, because there is a risk that we have a pool of kind of, happy amateurs who can dabble in some of these things, but actually don't understand about robustness or the consequences of getting it wrong. Now, over time, that might go away if we can start to kind of automate the way that data is published, the way that data quality is monitored, the way that we think about access management, and in particular, if you think about the ethics of using very sensitive data. These are serious topics, and you don't want to kind of go into them lightly. But I think it's okay, it's okay to start with a general interest in what the outcome is that you can generate.
So what is a successful outcome? If a business invests in some mechanism for collecting some of this data, well, actually, first of all, how does a business collect this data? With marketing, it's pretty straightforward. You've got your tool, whether at one end of the scale it's responses or the other end of the scale it's MailChimp. You've got a tool and it's saying you send this stuff out, you send it out to this group, you get this open rate. That's providing you with some data, and you might have some additional data that you can enrich the fact that everybody that's male has opened this one and everyone that's female hasn't. So you can kind of start to make something. But in other areas of the business, how do you go about collecting this data in order that you've got the raw materials to have insights to make better decisions?
Yeah, well, maybe I'll kind of challenge the assertion that in marketing it's straightforward. And I mean, it's kind of straightforward in a very narrow sense, that you can buy some kind of tool, as you say, and it will collect the data that it's very specific to that problem that it's trying to kind of attack. But when you talk about enrichment, actually combining that data with other data, which is often where a lot of value lies, is often not straightforward, or often not straightforward if you want to then have that data available to people in another department or for another kind of use case. Because marketing data is clearly, useful if you want to market to people, but it's also very useful for product development if you understand the kind of customers that you're trying to engage in. It might be useful to influence a brand campaign, and the brand team might be sitting in a different place in the organization to the CRM team who are running the kind of marketing solution that you've talked about. And those kind of trying to solve this for an organization, I think, is extremely challenging. This is the kind of thing that we're trying to do now. So we're trying to say, we're trying to kind of solve the problem of data being available for multiple use cases, while still having the correct controls about access management, permissions, and data ownership. And so the way that we do that is what we have, we're building a central platform that allows people to publish data on that platform and allows other people to access data with the technology associated with it that maintains the lineage and the kind of the reason for which that data was collected, so that we understand the boundaries around which we can use that data. I don't think that's a straightforward problem for any kind of big company. I mean, I think you'll find that most big companies have challenges in this area. And in particular, there are challenges for bigger, more established companies that have a lot of legacy systems. I worked for an insurance company, as you said, for a few years. There are systems in most financial services companies that have been running for decades. And so these systems were not built with the intention of having the data accessible. And so there are all sorts of workarounds, the technical kind of solutions to this, but making this a seamless experience for a data user is not a kind of, it's not an easy problem. And I think there isn't a one size fits all solution. I think this is why we get teams of data engineers. It's why chief data officer roles have become more prevalent over the last few years, because I think companies have seen that this stuff isn't just going to happen. It needs focus and attention. It might need to it might need a different kind of thinking about structures. It certainly needs a lot of thinking about the ownership of data, the management of it. And so it's really not just going to happen in an established company. So this is where tech companies, this is where startups have an advantage, because I think if you're starting in the world of algorithms, you're starting in the world of data engineering, if you're starting in the world where there are huge varieties in the way that we can define data, you're at an advantage because you can build your technology from scratch around that.
Yeah, you said something interesting there. Well, you said loads of interesting things then, but one particular bit that stuck out to me was the bit where you said about making the data accessible to other people in the organization. And is that a good idea? Because you get a load of enthusiastic amateurs that are looking at the data and not actually seeing what's there. They're seeing what they want to see there, and then they're making worse decisions as a result of looking at the in quotes data rather than using potential gut instinct or experience to make a decision, which is how things would have been done up until now. So what's the difference, I guess, between getting it right, so somebody like you looking at the data and saying, okay, well, this, if you want to view this accurately and robustly, this is what it's telling you, and somebody like me looking at it who says, to support my assertion that everybody who lives in Suffolk is smarter than anyone else in the world, or whatever the assertion that I want to promote is. So what's the difference between getting it right and getting it wrong, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, and I mean, I think the only answer, which isn't an easy answer, but I think it's the right answer, is that the making data available has to come alongside teaching people how to use data responsibly, teaching people best practice, teaching people actually scientific thinking. The advantage of using data is that you should be able to experiment and test and learn, and you should be able to scale up the things that work, and you should be able to stop the things that don't work. And that kind of mindset, that sort of discipline, requires a scientific approach to problems that have not in the past been solved with a scientific approach. They've kind of been solved with sort of informal learning. And there is a risk, and you do see it in companies where they start on their journey of becoming more data literate, or whatever they want to call it. And what happens is people just ask for some data that supports the view they had before, and then don't pay any attention. They don't pay any attention to data that doesn't support that view, or you get people that just don't want to do something, so they keep asking for another question that's around data, and they say, "Oh, show me the data, and show me some more data, and what about this bit of data?" And there are ways in which you can sort of misuse the philosophy of data literacy or being data driven. I'm hopeful that this is a kind of relatively short period of time that we're going through at the moment where you see that kind of behavior, because I think without using data, it's very hard to scale up the way that you learn about anything. And so bigger companies, I think, will have to kind of adopt these more formal approaches to use data if they want to continue to grow. And this kind of scientific view of trying to test and learn and do that with some kind of robustness, do that with some kind of rigor, I think is the right way to do that. But that's a skill that sits alongside the technical challenge of making data available. This is an education and a mindset, piece of development that people need to have to do.
How do you measure the value of using data versus that gut instinct that you were talking about? Because there is a cost associated with collecting, interpreting, and using data to at least help with the decision, if not make the decision, where we come to the decision I was just going to make anyway. How do we justify the cost of data in that sense?
Well, I don't think you should be too obsessive about trying to measure the benefit of every single instance of using data. And I also don't think you should stop people using gut feel in some cases. I think you need to take a kind of pragmatic approach, in my view. I think you need to kind of say, look, all of the investment that we've got in data-driven initiatives, which include maybe technology investments, education, upskilling, kind of cultural learning across an organization, do they, broadly speaking, pay back somewhere? Do we have enough use cases, enough, you should measure enough things to make sure that your initiatives are paying back, for sure. But I think most companies will find that there are some very big initiatives where a bit of rigor, a bit of robustness, some facts on the table, a bit of automation, a bit of scalability very clearly pays for some sort of data program somehow. I don't, and then I think as soon as data becomes a bit more of the currency of the company, then I think an individual person can make a judgment about whether they want to put some data on the table, or whether the cost of collecting that data is too much. I think that can be an informal decision, I think, for some cases, as long as there are enough big, impactful, measurable initiatives that make sure that you're justifying the initial investment.
I'm glad to hear you say you don't discount gut feeling entirely, because data is, I'll use the word encroaching on professional sports. And I miss that gut feeling, that gut reaction that the manager makes regarding, oh, well, no, the data told us to play it this way instead. So it's nice to hear that there's value in both still.
I think there are many instances where data can be the platform or the springboard for making a better decision that also includes gut feel. I think the data will very rarely tell you what to do, but it can, it's another piece of information that you can put into the mix. And I think historically it's been a piece of information that has been underweighted in this mix. And I think what we're seeing now is we're increasing that weight. That can go too far. You can kind of push it, and you can have overclaims about the value of data. And I think that's what you're kind of seeing sometimes. Sometimes you can kind of get so carried away with the hype of data that you forget something that maybe you thought was blatantly obvious before. And I think that's that kind of balance that we all have to try to get right.
Yeah, it's a fascinating topic, because when you think about this relationship between data and the gut feel, right? It's I understand what the data is saying, but I've been out talking to people, or I have, and there is a question. You have to sometimes question, right, the source of the data, maybe how something was asked or what was going on. When you were talking about that, I was just thinking about the election that we had here in the United States. And in the last couple of weeks there was, this idea that there was going to be a certain outcome because of, what was going on in the economy. And yet we had a president who went out and started talking about some things in the last couple of weeks that turned out to be, differentiating, for the outcome. And so it's really very fascinating to me how you really have to really think about the sources of the data and what's going on, and determine whether that is consistent with your experience, or whether there might be a problem in the data. Would you agree with
and
that?
I think what you're kind of, the example that you give is a good example of something a bit more general, which is trying to predict human behavior in uncertain times.
Right.
And that's fundamentally that's a difficult problem. And I think, whatever data you try to collect, that's going to be difficult. And often the most misleading data is the data that comes from asking people what they're going to do in these uncertain times. And this is kind of back to the Netflix example of DVDs. If you ask somebody what film they're going to watch next week, they'll give you a very different answer to if you sit them in front of a streaming service and ask them to pick a film. People are very bad at telling you what they're going to do in the future, because they don't know what's going to happen in the future, and their preferences change when the time horizon shifts. So it's sort of, that's an example where I think there are overclaims about the power of some types of research data or some types of research information, survey kind of research about consumers' intentions. Now, there are ways to kind of mitigate that, and there are ways to structure that kind of research to make it better. But ultimately, if you want to know what somebody's doing, the best way to measure that is to look at what they're doing and record that somehow. And trying to kind of ask somebody to predict that is pretty difficult.
But it is a good way to predict what they're going to do by looking at what they did.
Yeah.
Or is that
what they did under similar circumstances? That's pretty good.
Spoken like a data scientist.
But and it comes down to the judgment about what are similar circumstances. I think the big myth about data science is that it's all totally objective. I think there is a lot of judgment involved in building an algorithm, and I think that's part of the skill of being a data scientist. It's trying to exercise judgment and trying to make an assessment of whether the data sources that are used to train the algorithm are representative of the circumstances in the future where the algorithm is going to be deployed. Now, in some cases, that can be straightforward. If we have a molding machine in a factory and we want to predict some bit of its behavior, it's a very controlled environment. And if we train something there, we've got a good, we've got good reason to believe that next month the circumstances will be similar. If you're thinking about consumer shopping behavior during a pandemic, online versus offline, it's there's a lot more uncertainty about some of those things. And fundamentally, people don't know how they're going to behave under these new circumstances. So that some of that judgment has to be involved in the process of carrying out, data science or any kind of data analysis, really, and even sort of informal data analysis or assessment of the facts in a situation. Data analysis is not a substitute for common sense. It's something that should augment common sense.
that's a brilliant
There's
line.
the quote.
Yeah, that is a gem of a quote. So, here's the thing. So Alex and I met when we both worked at Oracle. Oracle, obviously, one of the biggest tech firms in the world, turns over $40 billion a year, collects loads and loads of data. I'm not quite sure how much of that data is ever actually used, but they collect loads and loads of data, and hopefully that steers them to make better decisions. But most people don't work for multi-billion-dollar companies. Many people are starting their own small business or running their own small business. So what should they be doing to collect data? Because I get the impression that you said about legacy systems with companies that have been around for a long time. And it's like, okay, this is where I am. I'm asking for directions. And the first thing the person giving me directions says is, well, I wouldn't start from here if I were you. And we're in a situation where typically people are going to be thinking, okay, we need to make some more robust, also have some more robust thinking about the decisions that we're making. If only I had collected this data for the last year, that would have helped me enormously, but I didn't, which means they're either back to square one again, or they've got to push out that decision for a year. So what should people be doing now in order to gear up for having the raw materials to make those better decisions in the future, do you think?
Well, I think one of the things that data is good at is helping people avoid assuming that all of their customers are just like them. And so starting off with some kind of measurement of how customers are behaving, how they're interacting, any kind of other information that you can gather on in terms of customers' backgrounds or anything that you can kind of, I think that's a good place to start, because I think that's where there are often some revelations. Revelations in the variety of customers that you might interact with, and also the size of different types of customer groups. People often have very strong preconceptions about these things. It's relatively rare for data or data analytics or data science to come up with really massively surprising things, because typically you're just kind of you're capturing things that are within the boundaries of what you might expect. But I think if you do a kind of analysis of your customer base, you could often be surprised by the relative sizes of different types of customer groups. I think what I'd then say is rather than assume what a customer group might want, find ways to put real products in front of customers and test what they actually do, measure what they actually do in as close to a real life situation as possible. I don't mean ask them what you think you would do if you had this thing with a red button on it. Create the thing with a red button on it, give it to a customer, get the right permissions and everything, but actually observe what they actually do and try to measure what they actually do. And do that rather than make assumptions. Test as much as you can, prototype as much as you can, measure as much as you can, and then use that as your sort of as the start of your test and learn cycle. That's, I think, the thing that can break the sort of deadlock that people have, where they think, well, I've never really collected data, I don't really know how to do it. You don't need to do it at massive scale. Just try to pick a particular use case and do this on a small scale first, and then see how it goes.
That's almost the Kickstarter approach, isn't it? Well, before I build this, let me sell it, see who's going to buy it. Awesome.
Yeah, although as somebody who's invested in a couple of Kickstarters and several years down the line have not received the products,
would I be right? That was the folding USB-C charger.
Oh, when you said folding, I probably shouldn't name and shame here, but it's not a folding USB-C charger. But that actually sounds like a great idea. So that one would have got me too.
Yeah, it would have been.
Yeah.
Yes, I've had a couple of those myself.
Oh, sorry. Well, I had actually, when you first came on and you were talking about some of the things that Lego Group has been doing, I got a little excited because you were talking to my inner child, and I was thinking about a problem that I would have as a kid, which is I would imagine something that I wanted to build, and then I would look down at the limited number of bricks that I had, and I would say, how in the world am I going to get from here to there? I don't even know what bricks I need. So then I kind of went over to the app as you're talking about all this stuff that was on the website, and I see that you have something called a Lego Builder. And the Lego Builder is sort of like, you go on there and you imagine and you build. And then I presume, because I haven't done it, it says you can also build with other people. So, in my mind, I imagining, I'm coming up with the vision and my daughters are on their iPads and they're kind of adding to what we can build. And then does this then tell me what bricks I need and how much that's going to cost me to do my thing?
Well, it maybe doesn't have everything that's in your dreams right now, but we're doing a lot of testing behind the scenes around that kind of functionality. We're trying to think, well, what's a practical way of suggesting some other things that people can build with the bricks that they already have? So we've been kind of investigating that kind of thing. At the moment, you can have a look at things like building instructions. So, we've had a lot of feedback around people who have something that they've built. It's maybe broken a bit over the years. They don't know where the instructions were. We've got more of an archive now of some older sets so that people can recreate the things that they have, using the original instructions. And we've got these kind of instructions, as you say, where people can have joint building experiences. The Lego Builder app, I think, is we're going to have a whole load more stuff that we'll be adding to that app. But we're always experimenting and trying to think actually how we can tap into that sense of wonder, because people see the bricks they have, they know that there are endless possibilities, but maybe they need a little helping hand to kind of understand how to get there. So yeah, that's exactly how we're thinking about that.
Yeah, that is just really exciting. I actually think, because I was looking at it, I was like, this is kind of like marketed to kids, but with the possibilities, right, of what we can do with digital and what we can do with data, I'm thinking to myself, wow, there are a whole lot of adults who remember the limitations of what they could do as a kid that might get re-engaged with Lego with, you know, some digital help and a much bigger budget.
Well, that's always nice.
Yeah.
But, you know, we encourage everyone to play. We don't think that stops. You know, we've got a phrase internally, children are our role models. So we kind of, we want everybody to really embrace that playful spirit. And it doesn't matter what age you are.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I love it. Thanks so much.
Brilliant. So any last questions for Orlando before we wrap up? So actually, you can have a comment on this one that came in from Martin earlier. I fully understand how Lego as a company is digital and data driven, but the end product, the Lego brick, is, well, it is the most analog possible of things, isn't it? In every way. So that must have been a big shift for the organization, you know, making plastic bricks that kids play with. I mean, I know that it's far more than that, and for 50 years there've been the technical sets where you can build diggers and stuff and motorize them, but it's basically began as a kid's construction toy, and now it's become so much more, because I bet that revenue wise a significant portion of revenue is sold to people like Lenwood that say, I can't afford a brand new Porsche GT3 parked on my drive, but I can afford the next best thing, which is the $300 Lego kit of that. So how has the company made that transition, I guess?
Yeah, or if you're like me, my wife won't let me buy a real Mustang, but I can buy a Lego build of a Mustang, and it's great. But it's kind of, we still see kids as our target market. You know, the products that we build have a lot of learning in them. They have you know, lots of education. When we talk about inspire and develop the builders of tomorrow, the main people that we want to interact with are kids. You're right, adult fans are a big and growing and important part of the mix, but I think we want to get that balance right. We don't want to move away from the focus on kids. We just want to create you know, great adult products as well. And you find that the adult products that we create are often tapping into this kind of childlike sense of wonder as well. We have lots of people who've grown up with Star Wars who want to have a bigger, you know, Millennium Falcon, or all these kind of, you know, fantastic builds that we can create. And I think, you know, back to the question, I think we still see the physical brick as being central to the Lego building experience, and we want to create digital experiences that augment that supplement it, that make it even better. But we don't want to take away from the power of the physical product, because I think that's very close to our, you know, it's very much part of our DNA, and it's where we started. And we started, you know, we celebrated our 90th anniversary this year. Originally a carpentry business, so we had, you know, wooden toys. But one of the celebrations has been we've created a 3D printed version of the first toy, wooden toy, which is a wooden duck, which if you go to Billund, where our headquarters are, and you go to Lego House there, you can get yourself a 3D printed wooden duck. So we're always playing about with these the kind of analogies between the way that we're moving digitally, but the way that we've always had this heritage in a physical product. And we think that this is going to be a happy partnership for many years to come. And we also think that this is what consumers want. You know, I think consumers, kids, adults, whoever happen to interact with us, we think still really want a physical product. They just want a great digital experience to sit alongside it.
Brilliant.
Yeah. Sorry. No, I just one more thing about that.
Go for it.
So you know, when you were talking about the, you know, the adult market, you know, I was thinking about, you know, I don't know how many parents there are that are out there like me, but my daughters didn't get their start with Lego because they saw something Lego. They got their start with Lego because I wanted them to, you know, experience what I experienced as a child, and I wanted to see them and what they would do with that first, you know, there's like a starter box, you know, that has 300 or some Legos in it. And so that is the first kit that, you know, they'll get under the tree. And just that, you know, opening up, you've got all the possibilities of those bricks there, and the mind starts to go, what can I build? And I think, you know, that's, you know, I just love the combination of being able to imagine, do it digitally, experience it digitally. I mean, I'm already in a virtual world with bricks that I'm building, you know, that I could maybe do life size where I'm in it, but then have the ability to take that with the actual brick and create that. And it's the full experience, being able to go from the imagination to the, you know, putting it together in a virtual world and then building it physically. That full experience, you're absolutely right. That brick in your hand and actually building it is the you know, the cap on the whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we want to think about. How do we get people's real experience of a physical product and then also tap into the imagination that they might have that might be unleashed in a digital world? So yeah, that's what we're trying to do. That's kind of very much our strategy, and we're hoping that that's going to tap into both the kind of, you know, the engineering, the art and the science side of people's building experiences, but also the technical, you know, technological possibilities that come with the digital world.
Yeah, fascinating. Thank you so much.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Orlando, for being our guest today. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you for having me.
For coming on the session. Thank you, obviously, to the audience. And what are we, Rob? We are
the longest running weekly business talk show on LinkedIn.
Fantastic. Thank you all very much indeed, and we'll see you next week.
See you guys.